What is it exactly that gives 80s music that unique, moody vibe? So dramatic, so atmospheric compared to what came before and after. Is it the way it was recorded? The way it was sung? All those synthesizers and swirling guitars? The song lyrics? The clothes? The haircuts? All of those, even the haircuts, played a part. There's something else. Something that gets overlooked now that we make records in a different way. And without it, even if everything else is right, it's never going to sound like the 80s. And I'm going to show you exactly what that one thing is using science. So here's a question from a viewer who calls himself Tim. What would be your top list for things to do when recording in order to make your sound seem more like it truly came from the 80s? The question continues. Espen Kraft did a video on this recently, but curious to hear your own insights. I haven't watched Espen's video yet, but at the end of the video, I will watch it with popcorn and while solving a Rubik's Cube because, the 80s. So you can get my reaction. I'm sure it'll be good. Espen is always great, but I think he probably won't give the same answer as me. Because back in the 80s, we were all told that drum machines and sequenced music were sterile because they kept strict time, had no dynamics, and the sounds were too repetitive. Every sample sounded exactly the same every time. Now, I liked electronic pop, as well as goth and indie, so I didn't think it was sterile. But I didn't challenge the idea that the timing and sound were too consistent. I am lucky enough to have access to some original master tapes from the 80s. A few years ago, I was reviewing one, a #1 record from 1987 by a very famous electronic pop band. I was analysing it in the computer so I could actually see the graphical representations of the sound. And I noticed something very strange. All the drums were out of time with each other. It was subtle, but it was there. Drums out of time? Surely it's a sin. Studio equipment was pretty good in the 80s, so how could this have happened? So I did my own tests. About a month of them. I rigged up drum machines, vintage ones, modern ones, programmed patterns using sequencers, changed my gear, tried everything. Sure enough, whatever I tried, everything was slightly out of time. Consider my mind blown. This sent me into something of a tailspin because I had genuinely believed that 80s electronic pop had very strict timing, and that's what gave it the sound. Well, I certainly needed my drum parts to be super tight, so I fixed them in the computer. I literally pressed the button that moved every drum hit onto exactly where it was supposed to be. And this is where things got weird. The sound changed. I'm not talking about the feel, though that probably changed too. But all of a sudden, everything sounded sterile. Why? We all know that computer-generated music today is often criticized for being too perfect. You've probably heard that argument before. Everything lines up exactly, and that can make the music feel a bit robotic. But there's a deeper, less obvious reason 80s music sounds so different. And it's something I bet you haven't heard before. It turns out that the small differences in timing between drum hits, things like the snare arriving just a tiny bit before or just after the kick, create a unique sonic texture. Let me put this in scientific terms. In my tests, each drum hit has its own timing error of a few milliseconds. It's subtle, small enough that a human would still perceive the drums as hitting together. But because these errors occur on a per drum basis, the alignment between drums, like the kick and the snare, changes every time. This shifts their phase relationship, causing certain frequencies to be cancelled or reinforced differently with each hit. So even if every kick and every snare are identical samples, the combination will still sound slightly different each time. Oh, and by the way, I've actually measured errors of up to 7 milliseconds in each direction, which is far more than I expected. And for those of you who are DJs and think in terms of BPMs, I programmed a beat at a strict BPM of 116. Each of the kick and snare was drifting between about 114, 118, and independently of each other. The beat still sounded steady. In fact, it sounded really good, but you don't get those timing drifts with a computer. So this is a phenomenon that I'm calling temporal phase drift, because that describes the natural timing drift that gives 80s music its distinct sonic signature. It's real and it sounds like the 80s. Your brain picks up on the tiny sound changes, which is what gives the sound life. Speaking of life, did you know you can actually prove that machines have a soul and vibe using a stethoscope? I'm using this red one, which is vintage from the 80s, although a modern one will work fine, provided it's medical grade. So this is my vintage Roland R8 drum machine from the 80s. And you can hear the vibe. And this is my modern hardware sequencer. And you can hear the vibe there too. And now if I go over to this really modern 909 clone by Behringer, there's still a really strong vibe. But if I go over to my computer, absolutely nothing. No vibe at all. Literally dead. And that, viewers, is why relying on a computer for sequencing might be robbing your music of that authentic 80s feel. The tiny timing imperfections and natural randomness that come from hardware make your music sound alive. Because in a way, these machines are alive. In fact, our brains tend to respond more positively to organic, non-repetitive sounds like ocean waves or white noise because those have subtle variations that feel more natural and engaging. Perfectly repetitive sounds can feel mechanical or sterile, while slight randomness in natural sounds keeps the brain more actively engaged without overwhelming it. So in fact, all the so-called machine music made by Kraftwerk, Human League, Pet Shop Boys, Soft Cell and so on have plenty of organic sound content. And even when computer-based systems like the Fairlight CMI or Synclavier were used, the timing imperfections from MIDI interfaces and hardware still introduced this temporal phase drift. And of course, many of the parts were played by humans rather than everything being programmed. So if you make music using samples on a strict computer grid, you're going to have to work really hard to make it sound like the 80s. So to answer the original question, what should you do to make your sound truly feel like it came from the 80s? The secret is in avoiding the computer for your sequencing. If you want that authentic 80s sound, program your drum machines or hardware sequences instead. That's where the organic sound comes from. It's not just about the instruments you use. It's about those slight, natural timing imperfections that happen when hardware isn't perfectly in sync. If you rely on a digital audio workstation and snap everything to the grid, no amount of retro synths or drum samples or 80s reverb is going to give you that sound. But when you let the hardware do its thing, those tiny timing discrepancies give the sound life. I know this isn't the answer that some of you wanted to hear. I get it, a lot of you work entirely in the box, but if you really want to capture that 80s sound, and I know not all of you do, then honestly, in my opinion, it's all about those tiny imperfections, lots and lots and lots of machine timing errors. So ditch the grid, trust the hardware, and you can't help but sound like the 80s. But right now, as advertised, I'm going to grab some popcorn and a Rubik's Cube, watch Espen's video. Let's see what he says.